It's no secret that the Disney Plus Marvel shows haven't really set the world on fire. At best it's been, did you see the new Hawkeye show? Sorry mate, I haven't. Is it good? Yeah, it's pretty good, but you don't need to rush to see it or anything. They're about that good. However, all these shows have been about pre-established characters, guaranteeing people will check them out, because why not? Got nothing better to do. Why take a gamble on a show I know nothing about when I can watch a show with a character that I already know I like? Enter Moon Knight, a show about a character that not even some Marvel fans know, starring a brilliant actor who has unfortunately been linked to some of the most disliked films in pop culture despite being among the better elements of these properties. Add to this a trailer where he's sporting an English accent that raised a few people's eyebrows and you're in for an interesting product. Now let's start with Oscar Isaac's English accent, since, and you may not know this, as I've kept it a secret all this time, I am actually English. In my humble opinion, I think Oscar Isaac's accent was perfectly fine, and it didn't bother me at all. Although my friends don't agree with me, that said, my mum, who is also English and didn't know who Oscar Isaac was surprised to learn that he was American. So I guess the best way to describe the accent is divisive. Now that's out of the way, let's talk about the actual show, shall we? Moon Knight Episode 1 is the best first episode of all the Disney Plus shows that I have seen. The episode takes its time in introducing us, the viewer, to Stephen Grant, while simultaneously concocting this mystery about Stephen's life and why he's seeing the things he is, before leaving us with that amazing ending to get us hooked. This episode is really good, and in my opinion still remains one of the best episodes of all the Disney Plus shows. It is suspenseful and intriguing as the show digs its hooks into you. My one issue with the episode, and it may be my biggest complaint of all, is that the CGI is pretty crap. I know it's still better than the CGI in most shows, and is night and day when compared to the DCCW shows, but I've been spoiled by Disney Plus. I believe it's no exaggeration to say that the CGI in Moon Knight is by far the weakest. Even his suit is noticeably CGI, which will draw unfavourable comparisons to Green Lantern, which for my money is not as bad as everyone says it is. That said, it would be unfair of me to classify all of Moon Knight's CGI as underwhelming, since the CGI of the gods was exceptional, and a lot of care and effort was put into bringing them to life. Now the next few episodes of Moon Knight are not as good as this first one, as I feel like they lack episode 1's greatest strength, pacing. It feels like the writers were trying to rush forward towards the finish line and just exposit information as quickly as they could. Fortunately, Oscar Isaac is there to hold our hands and guide us on this journey with his fantastic dual performance as Stephen Grant, who takes up the mantle of Mr. Knight, and Marc Spector, who is the titular Moon Knight. Neither character feels alike, but it also doesn't feel like the characters are complete opposites of each other. Whilst Marc is clearly the brawn while Stephen occupies the brains, it becomes clear that Stephen represents everything that Marc wants to be, and it's no surprise that the two often come at odds due to Marc's more violent nature. That said, the show creates an almost brother-like bond between the two, which, continuing with Stephen being who Marc wants to be, culminates when Stephen reveals Marc's secret to Layla instead of kissing her. And then he kisses her, which makes Marc punch him like a brother would. Speaking of Layla, I found her character to be superfluous. It seemed to me that she was there so that Moon Knight could have a love interest. Did you know that before it was ultimately decided she would appear in Hawkeye, Echo was going to be Moon Knight's love interest? So you can tell that they really cared about Layla. Speaking of characters I don't care about, Ethan Hawke's Harrow. Ethan Hawke is a great actor, and he squeezed as much goodness as he could out of the role, but sadly Harrow is just a really uninteresting villain. If he was on a scale of Steppenwolf and Steppenwolf, then he would definitely be Steppenwolf. On the flip side, Khonshu was a great character, and brought real screen presence whenever he was there. You were never sure whether he was a good guy or not, and even after the season has ended, I'm still not entirely sure. And it's all brought together by a magnificent performance by F. Murray Abraham. Let's talk about episode 5 of Moon Knight. Episode 5, I think, is the best episode of television that Disney Plus have put out. Marc Spector was given all the character development he needed as we find out about his traumatic childhood that resulted in the creation of Stephen. This is the episode where Oscar Isaac earns his paycheck, as we relive every painful moment of his life alongside him, and can do nothing but watch from the sidelines just like Stephen. Fortunately, by the end of the episode, the brotherly bond between the characters has been solidified. Speaking of solidified, Moon Knight saves its last heartbreaking moment for the end of the episode when Stephen is seemingly killed and trapped in stone for all eternity, whilst Marc is able to enjoy the afterlife. But then, in a horrifying twist, Disney releases episode 6, and to the horror, but let's be honest, not shock of viewers, the episode is not very good. If episodes 1 and episode 5 were great examples of pacing, then episode 6 is a great example of why the show needed a couple of extra episodes. I've been talking to my friends about this show whilst it was airing, and we all agreed that whilst we liked the show, 6 episodes was just too little, and we were all certain that the final episode was going to be a rushed mess. This episode spent its entire duration undoing things. Marc leaves paradise so he can turn to stone with Steven, then they return to normal and leave the afterlife. Lila frees Khonshu. Khonshu fights Crocodile Lady and loses. Whilst Moon Knight is off moon knighting, Lila gets superpowers in a really cringy scene that probably could have done with another take.
Oh, you changed your mind. I would be delighted to accept you as my avatar.
I really hate this scene. Then Moon Knight and Lila fight Harrow and get their ass kicked, but not before the show reminds you that Lila is an Egyptian superhero so that everyone can applaud them. If this was The Boys, then you know we would see some exec licking their lips in anticipation for the pat on the back. But anyway, Lila's Falcon powers and Moon Knight also being there is not enough, and it takes another one of Marc's personalities to beat Harrow off screen. Then they throw Harrow on a rock, shove a crocodile inside him and put him in an asylum, but not before Marc and Steven flip him the bird and relinquish their Moon Knight powers. And then the end. It may feel like I'm exaggerating, but that really is how abrupt the ending is to this series. Marc and Steven have obviously returned to England in the final scene, but is Lila with them? Where did she go? This finale is really saved by its post-credit scene when Jake finally makes an appearance, hinting at future things for Moon Knight. Hopefully a second season. Considering how negative I've been about certain aspects of the show, it may come as a surprise that I actually consider Moon Knight to be my favourite Disney Plus show. Well, favourite MCU Disney Plus show. Yeah, it had its problems, but its saving grace is its touch of character, who is by far the most interesting character introduced in Marvel's underwhelming Phase 4, and it's all carried on the very strong back of Oscar Isaac. Although the fact that this show is my favourite speaks volumes of the quality of the other Disney Plus shows. That's all I have to say about Moon Knight. Laters, Gators.